Moment. Yes. Yes. My name is Christian Kühn. I'm the moderator of today's session. Michael Hiesmeyer switched sides today, so he will be a presenter and not a moderator as in the other breakout session together with me. We have a very special topic today. Walking hospital is a very strange combination of words, as we are actually used to a hospital as a place to lay down. And this can be found even in the word clinic. Clinic comes from kline, from the Greek word for bed. So the idea of lying down is very deeply entrenched in our idea of the hospital. And even in the Greek asklepieion, the oldest form of clinic that we know of, the main therapy was sleep. So the hospital was very closely connected with the idea of lying down, sleeping, and whatever therapy in addition happened. On the other hand, as Femke said in the small discussion we had before, only about 15 to 20% of the patients would be required to stay in bed. And on the other hand, they should get out of bed and probably contribute to their own healing process. And this will be the discussion that we will have today in the connection with three presentations. One, which will be the final presentation by Femke Feenstra. And before that, Michael Hiesmeyer will say together with Maja Kevdzija, will bring some results from a paper they are working on at the moment. And we, after these presentations, will have time enough to discuss the issues that will come up. With this, I want to invite Michael and Maja to start with their presentation, share the screen, and...
Yes, thank you, Christian. I'm sharing the screen. Can everyone see it?
So, hello, everybody. And it's nice that you're here. You see, I put the question mark behind walking hospitals, despite the fact that it's the kind of acronym that we invented together as the Healthcare Facilities Group. But already, as you see in this introductory slide, patients in hospitals are in beds and they are tied by lines and some monitoring and kind of condition considered that it would be helpful to have this person in bed. But as you see, this person is really awake, and I will at the end then show you what is all possible in terms of mobility. Next slide. Just you see how recently there is an editorial in Age and Aging, time to move again from deconditioning to reconditioning. But what are we speaking about? It's really a campaign that is happening now in the United Kingdom. Next slide. And pajama paralysis. Yeah, get up, get dressed, get moving. And it's really with a campaign, with a summit every year. Being in a pajama and laying in the bed appears not to be beneficial to patients. And let me go into some details about this topic. Next. Oh, it moved a little bit, so the Apple computer distorted a little bit.
I'm sorry, it seems, yes, that the font is not the same.
So I think an important issue is that this deconditioning is not only moving, but that physical deconditioning is also associated very often for elderly people with cognitive deconditioning. And for me, it was quite impressive to read that for elderly people, 6 months after discharge, 43% need help with medications. A quarter is not able to walk 400 meters, and 45% feel unable to drive. So their activity of daily living is severely impaired. And on the top of the graph, you see that there is, on the graph, you see that there is a kind of the blue line exemplifies that there is an age-related decline in the functionality, but that hospitalization very often accelerates this decline. And this is then called hospital-associated deconditioning. And it is coming from the combination of two facts. It's the hospitalization and the individual condition that the patients bring. The older they are, the less cognitive reserve they have. The more they have already lost body weight and functional activity, the more they will be prone to have physical impairment, but the hospital is in some way a noxious environment. There is an overload of stimuli that you are not used to. You sleep not well, there is noise, you are in a stress condition because you do not exactly know how your outcome will be. There is not much than being in a bed in most of the rooms. Being in a bed and watching TV is a kind of key activity in hospitals. And if you are not stimulated to use your brain to have interactions with others, then the cognitive function is worsening, but there is also physiological change. If you are in bed, your vessels are decreasing in your muscles by about 20% within a week. So your muscles will receive less oxygen if you move again. The vessels will be also more permeable. You will lose also fluid that should circulate and make in the circulation will be lost outside. So there are hard facts and many soft facts that are modifying this condition. And you see this in the next slide, that the combination of subject characteristic, hospital events, and in the hospital events, you see at the bottom steps per day. And if there has been research that the amount out of the bed and walking can be down to 7 minutes as a mean in many patients in hospitals. And so this is, of course, severe, but we will now show you a little bit what are the real data if you ask patients. Next slide.
Oh, it seems that the title moved.
Yeah, it's moved, but it doesn't matter. It's now the end of this is if you go to intensive care and on the left-hand side, you see a cross-section of the muscle, very well organized. And on the right-hand side, you see how the muscle looks after 7 days of critical illness. You see that the structure of the muscle is decomposed. And on the right hand of this graph, in this very excellent review from a Belgian group, you see that there, just as a symbol that on both sides, there is an atrophy of the muscle because the muscle is not stimulated. But disease on the right-hand side has also an activity. You lose your mitochondria, your cell repair is impaired because autophagy is down. And there is a kind of strong interrelationship of these factors with the loss of function. Next slide. And so what this graph shows you, if you have on the y-axis, this is functional status. If your functional status is very good, going to an intensive care unit and being in a hospital makes a decline, but then you can recover. But as you are starting at the lower level of functionality, the loss will be steeper and the chance to recover will be less. And it is important to note that even after the end of the acute phase, still deterioration continues. And one of the factors is impaired mobility and not being active. How often? So I see hospital-acquired deconditioning quite similar to intensive care acquired weakness. That's just the most extreme form of this condition. Next slide. And in a study that we are doing now since the year 2006 in hospital, it's a cross-sectional study called Nutrition Day. We are assessing patients that are present in hospitals on a given day. And we look for history of patients and risk factors. And on this one day, we look how they are eating, how they are moving, how they are behaving. And you see on the graph at the bottom, that is from an architect, Magdalena Meyerhofer from the Technical University, how the hospital is like a block and is not doing is a kind of similar to this block. A city is something that is diverse, but the hospital is like a monument in the middle. Let's look now what we observe and how this may relate also to outcome, and Maja will go into details. What you see is that in this study we have now two cohorts. The first cohort, 150,000 patients, and the second cohort, 38,000 patients. They are from about 60 countries. And on the, I will just allude to the left-hand graph. In gray is patients that have not a history of having been in an intensive care unit, and in orange, it's patients that have been in an intensive care unit. And you see that overall, the most left-hand bars indicate how many patients on a given day in hospital are mobile. So only just above 60% of those without ICU stay and about half of those with an ICU stay indicate that they are mobile. About a quarter needs assistance, and about between 10 and 20% are indicating that they are bedridden. So it is a high proportion of patients that are with impaired mobility, and the whole infrastructure of the hospital does not consider the workload and also the opportunity to make them moving. Next slide. And within this study, we have developed a severity scoring system that is called the Pandora score. And this scoring system identified factors that allow us to predict the mortality within the next 30 days in hospital. And in these factors, you see it is just 7 items. It's age, body mass index, what means obesity, yes or not. Can you walk? How much did you eat today? And then whether you are internal medicine or surgery, and or have cancer. And then there is the fluid status. The fluid status with overload or dehydration is a kind of proxy of heart failure or impaired physiology. And if I take the point in the middle, I stay in bed. It gives 11 points. And that is similar to be 70 to 80 years old instead of 40 years old. So we could say being in a bed is like being older by 35 years. And that's very clear. That gives a kind of image how much it's the same as if you are starving and not eating, despite the fact that you could eat. And it's the same as cancer with 9 points, or fluid overload, that is heart failure, with 10 points. So just being in bed makes you kind of severely ill by this condition. And next slide is probably the last one, where I show you that even patients that are treated in intensive care units that have been ventilated or even on the ventilator, they can ambulate. But it needs a lot of effort. There is no room where to go. There are no correct spaces. All these patients benefit, for example, if you put them to the garden. ICU patients are kind of strange, hanging in their bed. And when they have been brought with their chair, even ventilated outside of the hospital, in front of the hospital, and they felt open air, the next day they are changed. And these opportunities, they are not favored by the structure of the hospital. And I would like to hand over now to Maja to give us a little bit more details. Please.
Thank you, Michael. So I will continue talking about mobility and activity of patients in healthcare facilities, and I will probably focus a bit more on the more mobile patients, actually. So as Michael explained, mobility and activity during hospitalization and recovery are extremely important, but they are usually not encouraged by the care organization and also by the design of healthcare environments. And to illustrate the magnitude of this problem, I will briefly explain some findings of 2 research studies. And these studies were conducted in different settings. I think this is quite interesting. So one study was conducted in hospitals and the other one in rehabilitation clinics for neurological patients. And also they were conducted using different methods. So one with online questionnaires and the other one with patient shadowing. And as Michael already said, this Nutrition Day study is a very, very large annual cross-sectional study that is including hospitals worldwide, and it is being conducted every year since 2006. And today I will show results only after 2016, I think. And the study on mobility in rehabilitation clinics was conducted in Germany in the period from 2015 to 2020. So it does not include activities of patients during the pandemic, unfortunately. And it was also conducted by a single researcher. First I will start with this graph showing the mobility of hospitalized patients. So these are patients that are coming to general hospital for different kinds of things, such as a surgery or a different procedure. And it shows mobility status of these participating patients. In this case, the cohort is around 44,000 patients. And it shows their mobility status before hospitalization and then the current actual mobility in hospital at Nutrition Day, so when the data was taken. And what I find interesting here are several points. Michael, you could also jump in anytime if you want to say something. But for me, first of all, the number of patients who are completely mobile or mobile with help is very high. This is something that probably we don't think about a lot when we think of a hospital. We always imagine someone who is very severely with a very bad health who has to lie in bed, but actually most patients are mobile in a way. And this has implications also for the design of hospital wards and the organization of care, because it brings the question, why is most care and other activities, for example, eating, organized in bed? So this is a very big question. And at the same time, this concept of care and also the organization of the wards might have adverse effects on the well-being and also recovery of these patients. Because if we look at this graph, considerable number of patients had worsened mobility during their hospitalization, which is around 12% of them. And most likely the environment and also the organization of care had some kind of impact on this. Did you want to add something here?
No, I think it's very important, the point that you see this potential of those that could be mobile.
Yes.
If you favor them, but in fact, being able to be mobile does not mean that they are mobile in reality.
Exactly.
So I think you made a very important point.
Yes, and I think it's also interesting to look at the proportion of patients who were mobile and then became patients who need assistance or even bedridden, only during hospitalization. So this really brings this question, does everything need to happen in bed? And another interesting finding from this study is that patients' mobility before admission was also associated with self-perceived health in hospital at Nutrition Day. Because the proportion, if you look at the graph, the proportion of people with very good or good self-rated health decreased with decreasing mobility. And poor and very poor health status increased from 12 to 40%. With decreasing mobility. And this tells us that mobility is a very important factor in how patients perceive their well-being and health status in hospitalization. This is another important one. And I think I will stop here with the hospitalized patients because unless you want to add something, I wanted to introduce just the magnitude of the problem and show some brief findings relevant to the Nutrition Day study. And now I will talk about findings from rehabilitation clinics. And why I find this important is that you need to keep in mind that a rehabilitation clinic is a very different setting to a hospital, and that people there are not supposed to lie in bed. They're not lying in bed after a surgery or different kinds of procedures. They're usually quite mobile and they receive different kinds of therapies during the day. And in this study, 70 stroke patients were observed on an ordinary rehabilitation day. And each patient was observed for 12 consecutive hours during that day, so from morning until evening. And it is very important to note that all these patients were independently mobile. with or without the use of mobility aids. So some could walk, some used the wheelchair, some used the walker, but they were all independently mobile in the clinic. And this graph shows what kind of activities patients did during those 12 hours of observations, and also in which spaces in the clinics. It's important to note that on this graph, I'm showing aggregated time for all the patients spent per activity and location. And if you look at the first column, this is patient's room. So I divided the activities into scheduled and non-scheduled. Scheduled are the blue ones, which means all the therapies, all the appointments, everything they had to be at a certain time. And green is everything that they did in their free time. And I had to cut this column of being in patient room, as you can see there, because it would be through the roof compared to all the others, and it wouldn't be legible. That much time was spent in patient rooms. And then if you have a look at the other columns, most of them are scheduled activities. So something that patients had to do, had to go somewhere. And then we only have outdoor space appearing somewhere. So the middle, and then a corridor and dining room on the ward, which were sometimes visited during free time. And this is a very big problem, that patients spend so much of their free time in their bed, even though they're in a rehabilitation clinic where they should be mobile, active, and recovering to go back to their normal lives. Another interesting thing was to look at what individual patients did over the course of those 12 observation hours. I think that this kind of method allows you to look deeper into individual situations as well. And here I took out just some examples of patients. And it is very obvious that around 6 of those 12 hours were spent in patient rooms. But also it's interesting to look at how different patients spend their time, depending on their preferences and also their personalities. Some patients spent quite some time in the dining room on the ward, some spent it in the corridor, just sitting around. But what is common for the left side of this slide is that around half of the time or more was spent in the room alone. In their bed was probably. It's not completely clear what they did in the room. But what you can also observe that all these patients on the left were over 65 years old. And for me, it was interesting that the only younger patient that I observed, which was excluded from other analysis, had a very different daily schedule and also a different therapy plan as well. And he was much more active, spent much less time in the room, and also much more time in scheduled therapies. And another thing that was quite interesting for me in the conversation with him is that he did not want to eat on a dining room on the ward. He decided that he didn't want to do that, that people were just not motivating enough for him. So he decided to go to the main dining room on the ward that was on a completely different building level, and he had to travel quite a bit long distance to get there. But this was more nicer space for him, and he was telling me that he just didn't want to stay in this room on the ward. Another thing was the design of this ward dining room was not that great because it was built into a hill, so there was only this very high window, so there was not enough light, and the patient didn't like it. So we can see already here that the patient wanted to be in a nicer space, even though it asked for him to be more active and to kind of spend more time traveling to that place. He still wanted to be in a nicer space. And another thing that is quite important to take from this is that this much inactivity in stroke rehabilitation is actually in direct contradiction with all the medical guidelines for stroke rehabilitation that state that bed rest and inactivity should be greatly avoided during rehabilitation. This is quite a big problem. And then if we go back to all patients for a moment and just look at which spaces they visited only in their free time. So now we're looking only at their free time, not scheduled activities. We can see that a lot of time is spent on the corridor. This corridor talk came up a little bit in our discussion at the beginning. And this is usually a circulation space. But in the context of rehabilitation clinic, it becomes a space where different activities can take place, even if the corridor is not really designed for them. So I observed that it became some kind of an informal gathering space. It's also space for therapy. It's space to just sit and look through the window for all these different kinds of activities. Another interesting finding is that patients are alone in most free time activities, and only sometimes they're joined by other patients. And I don't know if you know this, but if you look at these observed activities, a lot of them are related to sitting. And this brings another question: how active and beneficial for these patients is this activity of sitting? Can we consider it activity, actually? And another thing that I wanted to bring up, which doesn't show up on this slide, but it's important to note, is that the majority of these patients stated that they did not like to spend most of their day in their room, and they wanted better designed common spaces and also more variety of common spaces. First two answers to their question or responses of what kind of space would they like to have was a common room and a cafeteria, which exist in all rehabilitation clinics, but they describe these spaces differently. So the spaces that were existing were not really fulfilling their needs or wishes. So they were saying that they would like a comfortable sitting room on the ward that is not in clinical style. They would like a cafe where they can receive visitors also after 5 o'clock. Also a place where they don't feel like they have to buy something, a place where they can meet people when they visit them that is outside of their room. They had very creative answers, such as one said that he would like an indoor Central Park situation, kind of a big winter garden. A lot of them wanted a dancing room, a music room, and different kinds of spaces that very often don't exist in the clinics. And I will end here the presentation with some conclusions and also some questions that emerged, and maybe it's also a good introduction to our next presentation. So first of all, the findings from both hospital and rehabilitation clinic settings show that patients are greatly inactive and that the majority of their time is spent in their rooms, most often lying in bed. Furthermore, there is insufficient research on how to promote mobility and activity of patients via building design, especially in general hospital population. There are some findings already coming up about people with dementia, also people suffering from stroke, but it's not clear how to transfer these findings to general hospital population. Then a question that emerges is how can mobility and activity be supported and also enhanced by architectural design? And what kind of spaces and also care concepts are needed? Because I feel that the care concept often needs to change to accommodate the changes in the design as well. If the care concept asks for patient to be in bed all the time and that the doctor comes to them, nurse comes to them, food comes to them, this is a big problem. So the care concept also needs to change. And then what about people with different mobility, abilities and levels? As Michael was talking about, what about people who are less mobile? How can we still allow them to be active, independent in a way? And another question is, can healthcare facilities be designed considering these multiple aspects contributing to patients' well-being? For example, environment supporting mobility and nutrition simultaneously. Could this happen? This is something that we are also discussing in our paper when looking at the nutrition data. And the final question is, what are the implications of innovative design concepts for medical staff? What does it mean for them, their workload, and their organization of care? So I will finish here, and then I hope that we can have a nice discussion and maybe talk about some of these questions later.
Thank you very much, Maja. I think it will be best to take this package of questions to the general discussion after Femke's presentation, if there are no urgent direct questions. And so we can come to the next presentation by Femke Feenstra. I have some biographical notes on her. She is partner and architect in the firm Gordemaka Alga Feenstra. She's one of the younger
very good.
members. The company is proud to combine very experienced and very fresh ideas. They work on assignments in healthcare and well-being, and they are not only designers, but they're also researchers and involved in different research projects. And I'm looking very much forward to your presentation. And I kindly ask you to share the screen.
I'm going to share my screen then. Oh. I'm already at the end, sorry. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. First, I wanted to thank you that you asked me for the presentation, and I also wanted to thank the previous speakers about giving again so much more information about why I think it is so important that we are really thinking about how can we redesign the hospital and other healthcare environments, as you said, rehabilitation centers, but also home care centers for people with dementia, for instance. And I think it's so enormously important to do this, that I think it's so good and so well done, the information and the research that you did about how important it is to move, because that's, I think, is the starting point for us as designers to be able to move on, and how can we really design these environments better. I will do a very short, or at least I will skip through it very shortly, quickly, presentation from our office or who we are. And then I will talk about the Reactivating Hospital and how we did it in practice. So this is who we are. We are with 3 partners, Roelof, Maurits, and me. We have an office that's already existed for more than 100 years, so it's a really old office. We're about with 80 people, and we're in an office in Rotterdam, which is a really green space that we have. And we also have a new office in Brussels, in Belgium. But we work internationally and mainly in healthcare. So in the Netherlands and in Belgium, we do also other projects, but in healthcare, we do it internationally, like all over the world, which is really nice because you learn so much also about other cultures, especially also about these topics, about food, how things are cooked in hospitals, for instance, but also about how we look at movement or our health concepts in other. So we learn a lot in that. I think, as you already mentioned, we do not only do assignments, we also do a lot of research. I'll tell you a little bit about it later on what kind of topics we do research. And the last thing is we call it development, but it's really about how we work together with our clients. We have a very strong method on how we work together with our users and our clients to really come to better solution for patients, for students, for, well, all kind of topics. A few of our projects, this is a project I did for Zurich 7, which is a living with care environment. And this is a home for 93 people with severe case of dementia, and they all have their own front door. So we have made 93 front doors, so they all have access absolutely to the park. And they have, and also the visitors, they come through the own front door of of their home, actually, which is a completely different way of thinking about how do you solve a living environment for people with dementia. And this makes that they really are able to go outside, to sit outside, to make use of the gardens, and to have a lot more independence still also in this phase of their life. We also do some other things, but mostly we say if it gets a bit complex, then we like to be involved. So this is a train control center. We did a mother and child hospital in Leuven.
You. I'm afraid we are not seeing your slides.
Are you not going through it?
Yes, we're still on the first slide.
I had this before in Zoom. Let me see. Do you still not? You see
Yeah,
it
it's
moving
moving.
now? Okay. Well, I go rushing through it now. Then I don't put it on the presentation screen because otherwise it doesn't work. Okay, so this is the 100 years that we exist. The 80 people, our green office. Good that you mentioned it because otherwise I would just go on.
Now I understand what you meant with the green space.
Oh, you ended there and then it stopped.
No. Now I understand what you meant with talking about the
Yeah. I'm
green
sorry.
space.
Yeah.
So we had to use a lot of.
So we now have the Belgium office, and as I said, we do a lot of international work, mainly on healthcare topics. We have 3 pillars. So our clients with the architecture, the research part, and the development. So the working together, how we work together with our clients. And this is the project that I was telling you about, the Zurich 7 project, where we have the front doors for the people with dementia. This is a train control centers. As I said, we really like complex projects or where we can really think about how can we solve it in another way. This is the Mother and Child Hospital in Leuven, where we really wanted to make a very clear environment for children. We want to think about every assignment that we have to make a solution where it's not, where nobody thought of, you know. So here we want to split the area for people, for the parents, and so that the staff wouldn't be in the way of the parents and the parents wouldn't be in the way of the staff. We do a lot of research, but also always with a design background. So we're now working on a future hospital research. We're a bit thinking the other way always. If you have to make a solution, how can you bring it a bit different than others? And we think about what should the effect of the design be on the end user, so on the patients or on the students. Well, as I said, working together for us we can only design in that way. And we try to go a step further. If we have to make a parking underground, how can we do that do introduce daylight for patients further than you have expected in the beginning? And what is the most important thing for us, that it's always, we make buildings for people. So that's, I think, the main topic. So we do a lot of topics, but a lot of it in healthcare. And as I said, we do a lot of research also. So we did research on how can we make programs for, how can we make a program, a digital program that can help us in making a hospital more efficient. So with maybe for daylight, or so you can really say what you want, the most important design factor to be. So if you want short walking distances, you can put that, and then you can, so it's more like a digital program. Now we're working on the future hospital, which is really about the network hospital. So a hospital that's not only the closed environment that it is now in the city, but how it's more open to the rest of the city, and what can go in the homes and what stays in the hospitals and what goes to the neighborhoods. So, but this is where I wanted to talk to you about the research by design on the Reactivating Hospital that we did. We were asked by TNO to think about how can you make people more active in the hospital, and by then I didn't know actually how important that was, and I think they didn't know either, so we found out on the way together. But if I think of a hospital, or if I look at a hospital, this is I think everybody recognizes these pictures, that these are the corridors. So you have the bedroom, you have the corridor, and then you have the staff rooms, and sometimes you have a family room or a eating space. But this is and if I ask a hospital which one of the corridors is yours, then I have to say they never recognize their own hospital. They never say, the middle is mine, because it is also the same. It's always the charts are in there, the medical equipment is in there, there's all that kind of thing. So this whole area just screams to you, stay in your bed, you have nothing to find here. And when we did the first phase of this research, we did it at the Diakonessenhuis in Zeist, that's in Utrecht, that's in the Netherlands. And when we just began, I was walking through the corridor, and then I saw this picture, and I said, "Hey, what is this picture?" And then they said, "Yeah, this is the hospitals in the 1905 or something. I don't know anymore." And I said, "Oh, but you did know what is important in the healing part." And then they said, yeah, but this is, well, I mean, if you look at this picture, you see people sitting outside, mixed use of people. You have elderly and children mixed up, people sitting, people standing. You have to come there. There's some patients are maybe in bed, but some are in a chair or walking around. And how did we get to the former picture of the corridors? So I'm not going to talk a lot about this, because I think the former speakers already said a lot about it, but it is really, I think it's really shocking about how much reduce in muscle strength and in condition that patients have, and the decline in health is seen. And especially, and I think for people like the most, I think that are maybe here, we are pretty healthy, and we can, if we have an operation or an intake, or we stay in the hospital for a while, we can still get our strength back, do our condition, which is already pretty hard for us. But if you're a patient that is more fragile, it's so hard to get back at your in the state that you were in before you came into the hospital. So if we talk about elderly patient, but also about patient with cancer, all kind of patients, it's really hard to get back to your old condition. So if we look, and I think you already told it, but if we look, if you go in bed, lie in a bed, then about 12% in a week is going, your muscle strength is just disappearing. And if you lie in a bed like 10 days, your condition diminishes with 10 years. And we see it also on the patients that we had for COVID. You saw the patients that had were moved to an IC, or they had to lie in a hospital. The condition diminished so rapidly. It's really amazing how we see it. But as long as we do this, I mean, as long as we put our patients in bed to sleep, to rest, to relax, but also to eat, to sometimes even move around, when the nurses come to the bed, the doctor comes to bed, the visitor comes to the bed, we won't have more strong patients to come out of there. And I think it's not only about, it's really in the mindset of people. So we are really so much used to patients lying in bed. If you go to a hospital, you put on your pajama, you lie in a bed, and you get healthy, and then you come out. That's what we all think about. That's what also is in the mindset of the hospital. You put a patient in a bed. I asked also the nurses, why is a patient in the bed? And she said, yes, he just is. I said, yeah, but why he has to be there? And then finally, at a long discussion, they said to me, yeah, because otherwise we don't know where to find them. And I said, yeah, but that's a very strange reason to be in a bed. I mean, that's a completely wrong motivation to put people in a bed. We can solve that problem. I think with all the new digital solutions that we have, we can solve a problem to a patient to be found. But it's so simple as that. And what I'm trying to tell you it's not rocket science what we try to do, but it is, I think it's a completely change of mindset that you have to have. So what we said, let's try and see that at the hospital as a much more normal environment, what you also would do at home. So 8 hours of sleep in your bed, 8 hours of relaxing, sitting, and 8 hours of being active. And in being active, I think you also mentioned it, Maja, it's not like you have to run around the hospital like for 8 hours, but it's also making your own sandwich. It's also, you know, taking a stroll around, maybe doing your own laundry in the hospital. When I asked the nurses, why can't I wash my own clothing in the hospital while I'm there? And they said, yeah, it's just hygienic problems. But it's strange. I mean, doing normal daily things really helps you to stay active already for a very big group of people. So it's not only a change in time, but it's also then we have to change also the whole layout of the department. So we need places to sleep. And of course, we have intensive care patients on every ward, and we have to make a good place for them too. But for relax, you have to make maybe a resting place where you can rest individually, but not in your bed, but already somewhere else on the department. Maybe a place for wellness, to sit, to meet your visitors. Maybe to work, to have a workspace where you can stand working or sit working, where you can go outside to make a little stroll, to, I don't know, to do an activity outside, to move, to maybe really be actively moving around, and also to eat. So as I said, we never do this alone. So we did a lot of workshop with a lot of different hospitals about what is important what do you think is important on a department, and how close should it be to the patient. And we really focus it on the normal daily rhythm and the normal daily exercises. It's not like, as I said, it's not like you have to run around all the time, but you have to focus on that. And it sounds really very simple, but it's a complete culture change of the hospital, because they are so used for like already a century to put the patient in the bed. So what we did is make a concept for the Diakonessenhuis in Zeist, and this is the layout that they were having. And we made a complete concept, a total concept for doing things differently. And in that, we also moved some of the patient's room because we always see the layout with the rooms along the facade, and then the nurses things in the middle, and then what we did is move some of the patient rooms also inside, because we said it's a sleeping room. We made them all one-person rooms, because we said sleeping, you do the best on your own. And for the rest, we also moved other functions to the facade so that they would be attractive and have daylight. As I think you mentioned it also, that there's a restaurant with only one little window somewhere upstairs, so it's really not a nice environment to sit. You have to make these environments attractive. You have to really seduce them to go there. So we would have more room for a normal daily movement. So in the nighttime, everybody of course sleeps in their room, but in the daytime, a lot of people can get out of the room and can get more active on the department. And some people, we also said some things can be in the rest of the hospital, but some things have to be closed because some people just are not allowed or not able to get off the department. So as I said, we really set up for single sleeping rooms, which are really compact, but are, of course, it's able to do a reanimation there. All the things are there to have. But in that, we made spaces to be able to walk. We made, of course, a restaurant and kitchen, and we also had talks with the people from the logistics and from the I wanted to say food, but well, that people are also able patient to be able to make their own sandwiches or to cook something themselves or with their own family. We have for instance, a lounge where you can sit with visitors or other patients or more on your own, because that's, I think you also said, Maja, people also really want to be on their own. We wanted a garden room to have people could go outside. For instance, here in a renovation, we took a part of the facade out. So it's more like a patio room. But also spaces for resting, more individuals, so that you could really, like in a well-being center, you can have your headphones on, have a nice view outside, but more on your own, and there you can. But we also made spaces for sporting, for listening to things. And after this research, we got a subsidy of the Dutch government, because they were really interested, and they said, can you try to make a few interventions in an existing hospital and find out if it really works. So this is what we did in the Diakonessenhuis, but then in Zeist, which is a department for people with dementia. And we had a very limited budget, but what we could do was do 2 rooms. We could do the corridor, and we made 2 more common spaces. So for these patients, it was really already the step from out of bed to the room was already a very big step. And as we know, everybody, I think probably with you, it's the same. The whole room is only the bed, and if you're lucky, then there's a little chair there, or there's a little table there where you can sit, but for the rest and we said it has to be much more like a living room that people would go out of bed. So the first thing we did was get the television from the bed to the living area, and we made a really qualitative living area, so much more, and with a chair where they can also lie in. And then I know Maja said, and I think was also in one of your points, sitting is also not good, but the walking to getting out of bed, walking, clothing yourself, or not having the clothes on, but dressing yourself, going to the bathroom, going to the chair, going sit there, the whole movement of getting there, it's already more than just staying in the bed. I think it's so important to have a good facility to eat in. And what we also did was, one of the things that you have the night cabinet where always the food is put on when you lie in the bed. We said, okay, we have to move that so in the daytime it's in the cupboard, it is it's not on the bed. So in the daytime it doesn't stimulate you to eat in bed. The next one was to, from the room to the corridor, to seduce them to go to the corridor. And what we did is we introduced there are 4 places for the patients. So we also discussed with the staff, how can we move all the trolleys, all the medical facilities, that to big spaces to storage places, and make the corridor clean, and how can we make then spaces that is really dedicated to the patients. And this is what we did, and I have to say this is what we also measured and what we observed, if it really works. And this is one of the things that really works very well, that people are so much stimulated to use them, also together with their visitors, also together with the staff, with nurses, that they sit there and play a record or write something down with a mental caregiver, or watch a movie, or do with the physiotherapist, do the movement things. And it's again, it's not rocket science what we did, and we had a very limited budget, so we were not able to complete the corridors, change the whole area there. But it is a complete change of use of these corridors. And the patient said to us too, we finally have this space to go to instead of, and what the nurses said to us, it's so good to have this because now we don't have to organize all these things for our patients, because they said we wanted patients to move, but we had to organize so much for them being able to do these things that before we started, we already stopped because we already thought, yeah, this is too much. We're not going to do that today. And now it's there. And then we did 3 rooms on the department. So we made a more living room kind of area, which they already had, but was really not a quality room. And we made it now that they can make the space, they can divide the space on the way they want it. So there are all kind of furnitures that they can move around. They can put it against also the cupboards. They can move it around the wall, but they can also divide the space with it. We made a resting area, so more a quiet room, we call it. We made a place where the piano is, but there's also the news is always on, like at 8 o'clock in the evening, there's always the news coming, but you can also play music there. And we made a garden room there. Of course, we had the space there that we were able to do that, and also there is like for a table where there are assignments where you can move around. And the physiotherapy uses this also a lot.
Femke, I don't like to interrupt, but
yeah,
we probably will be running out of time.
Yeah,
look at the
I
number.
will run through it, and I will run through the last thing, and then because the only thing I wanted to show you is that after all these researches, we did a reactivating. We are now working on lots of reactivating departments and hospitals. This is the one we did for Rijnstaten, and it's a geriatrics and an oncology department. So this is the geriatric and the oncology. And here we really did what we did in this study. We really made it. The building was already there, but it was a completely empty layout. And we designed this whole different spaces in. So we have the meeting, the living rooms. We have a small living room, which is more quiet, a silent room. We have music spaces here where it's not here yet because it was just after we finished the building. So, but now there are also music boxes there. We have an exercise place there. We have also the small rooms that are more inner so they are not on the facade. We have on the oncology department, we have more like an open area, which is more for younger patients, where they can also work or where they can make their own sandwich. We have the wellness bathroom there, and we call this the chemotherapy lounge, where people can sit if they have a chemotherapy. They're not allowed to go far from their room, but they can sit here and have more quality. And we also have a garden room there. So this is about it.
Yes, thank you very much for this fascinating presentation. It's the idea of open plan coming back to not coming back, but coming to the hospital for the first time, actually. And very interesting new answers to the question of single bedrooms or double rooms, which is replaced by a new approach. And I really congratulate you on these results.
Thank you.
So Maja had a list of questions. So who wants to?
May I start with a question and
yes.
just addressing your outlay with the indoor sleeping rooms. My feeling or my understanding is that perceiving night and day is very important for let's say brain reorganization, especially if you are in stress disorders or delirium or at risk for delirium. How are you handling this in the inside sleeping rooms?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Of course, we were experimenting with how much indoor sleeping rooms can you make and how much, because this is a very important one, to have the biorhythm and to really address that it's getting day and it's getting night. But this is especially, so for instance, in the Rijnstaten, we made 4 on the whole department, because we thought that's also more we couldn't make, because this is really for patients that are actually outside the bed all day. They have to be observed. They have to, they're not able to go home yet, but they are able to be out of the bed. For the rest, it's a more transparent room. So in the daytime, of course, you can have the curtains, but they're like glass curtains, so it's more transparent. You can watch outside, but they can't really watch in. And in the night, or in the time that it gets daylight, in the morning, we have like these glass. The upper part is from glass, so you get, and it's really close to the rooms that are on the facade, which are open or not. It's not a room. So they get the indirect daylight through that part into their. So they do have a feeling of that it's getting lighter. And we did also discuss about how we then cope with lights on the corridors in the night, because that's also a very important thing. But it's also for the other rooms a very important thing, because we are mentioned so many times that when the door opens, all the day all the light from the corridors just gets in. And people find it really, people don't sleep through that. So that's also something that is really, that you really have to think about how you design that.
And how about noise?
Yeah, that's also something we really were thinking about. And we have, there's these walls, at least in the Rijnstaten, we made the walls. It's not like a one, the glass, which is glass, it's like a isolated glass panel, so it's without the noise from the. Of course, when the door opens, the noise get in, but it's in every room. But so for the glass part, we really thought about that. But there are all kinds of, because there's a lot of open spaces, so there's all kinds of acoustic materials and acoustic implements in the whole facility to really cope with the noise. So it's actually, let's hope it's good. I never had a complaint about it. So I hope it works. Yeah.
How long is it running at the moment?
It's already running. Well, it's funny because they first put in a children's department, because they had to renew children's department. So they used it as a phasing space for a year. The children really found it very hard to get out of it again, because they really loved it. So, and the whole department and the staff wanted to stay, but they had to go to their old department. So it was already running a year, and now it's running a year for the oncology and geriatric department. So it's 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is enough to have some experience.
Yeah.
By whom? Michael Ment. Is this by accident, or are you waiting for discussion? No, probably it's by accident. Or do we not hear somebody? No.
Michael went. Do you have a question?
Oops.
No.
Apparently not.
We have some connection problems. I also was fascinated by the idea that you create spaces for different ages, movement spaces. Did this work out?
Yeah, it does. because we really thought about, I think, you know, the Reactivating Hospital, the research also learned us a lot about that it's not one type that you can place on every department, and it's in every department it can be the same. Of course, you have building blocks that you can use everywhere. You have the typologies that you can use, but you really have to think about what is this department and how should we what is the Reactivating Hospital, what does it mean for this department? So of course it could be a general layout, but you have to after that you have to discuss with the department what are the specific things for an oncology patient, or I don't know, maybe for let me see, I don't know, well, another type of patient for a heart department, or for a department for what is it called? I forgot the name. You know, where you get the new knees and the new hips and
orthopedic surgery.
Sorry?
Orthopedic surgery.
Orthopedic, sorry, I just somehow lost the word. You know, for orthopedic surgery for children department, it can also really work. For an elderly department, you have to really think about, okay, this is the general idea, and how can we make it work for this type of, you know, because for orthopedia, it is really important to move around and to do exercises, for instance. You know, for people with dementia, it's really good to have recognizable points to, you know, to bring in music, for instance. So you have these different things. For children, you have to be playful, and you have to really seduce them in to go and play and to get out of the bed. And this is also one thing we did, is make an IC for children, where after they are operated. It's really important for children to get out of bed as quickly as possible. So how can the IC and also the holding recovery make children after their operation, stimulate them immediately, if it's possible, to get out of bed. So we're working on that too, on a department for that,
It
which
sounds
is
like
really
a very
interesting.
incremental process of design, so that you're not define a goal and then directly approach it, but you have some goals and you experiment with spaces.
Yeah.
Did you have a client that was able to manage this? Because you have to keep some budget behind for this incremental process, that you change things, that you make mistakes, actually, that you will have made mistakes, you have to correct them. So do you need a certain amount of money that is not directly assigned at the beginning?
Yeah, well, what we see now in the projects we do now is that it is mostly in the budget immediately, and that we are able to do this because you have to really, especially with new buildings, you have to really think about how's the structure of the building and how, you know, how's the layout of a ward, for instance. The basic layout. So we have that covered now for our new assignments. With a renovation, of course, it's a different thing, and then we try to get a little bit of extra budget to really move this around. What you asked me, we didn't have that in the Reactivating Hospital, but I also did a research for psychiatry care. And there we did make a completely new layout also for a department. And there we did have a budget for things that we might have to change afterwards. And we did one thing, we made like a piece of furniture, because we took out completely the staff center, so the staff the nurse station. I always find it a very strange word, but the nurse station, we took it completely out, and we made more facilities for our patients in different spaces, instead of that they have to sit in one space at the same time. But we made a piece of furniture there that really didn't work, and there we had to change it again, and we did have an extra budget for that because we knew that it was an experimental layout, that we would have a phase. We had like half a year or 3/4 of a year where we were testing it or measuring how it was going. And after, I think, about a year, we changed one of the things. Yeah. But that's also, you learn a lot of that. I think it's so important to fail sometimes. We are now in a society where you're not allowed to fail, but I think it is important. If we're not allowed to, then we can't get a step further.
Make progress.
Yeah.
Without falling sometimes.
Yeah, you have to fall sometimes to get further, I think. Yeah, to think further than the things we already know.
Michael?
Bin ich jetzt zu hören?
Ja, jetzt ist gut.
Jetzt geht's gut, Entschuldigung, aber irgendwie gab es technische Probleme. Okay, erstmal vielen Dank für die gute Veranstaltung, vielen Dank für den schönen Vortrag jetzt eben. Ich möchte nur gerne anmerken, ich glaube, wir brauchen nicht nur eine neue Architektur. Beispiel, wir brauchen ein anderes Monitoring. Unser jetziges Monitoring, das wissen gerade wir Intensivmediziner, fixiert. So, das, was viel interessanter ist, ist ja zum Beispiel das, was im Smartphone-Markt in den Algorithmen da ist. Die nicht-invasiven Algorithmen, die, wie soll ich sagen, die Bewegung analysieren können und die Stabilität der Bewegung analysieren können. Damit können wir viel besser in Zukunft bewerten, sagen wir mal, was jetzt schon mal eine erfahrene Schwester macht, die sieht, wie geht der und kann dann nach Hause oder nicht oder so etwas. Das wird immer mehr objektivierbar werden. Zweitens, ich glaube, wir brauchen nicht nur einen Physiotherapieraum. Die Physiotherapie spielt auf den Normalstationen eine viel zu kleine Rolle.
Ja.
Ja, wir haben eine fehlbesetzte. Sorry, I don't speak English. Sorry.
Oh, don't worry. I understand everything, but I just don't speak German back.
Oh, sorry. No, it's my mistake. Sorry. But
no, don't worry.
I think physiotherapy is much less at the moment. And we need not so much nurses, but much more physiotherapy and activity, etc., etc. So the floor, and you have, let's say, a little bit remove the floor. But I think, yeah, you need more a training area or dancing area or what else it is. Yeah. And so this is very fine that you are the way you are going, but next step is one short addition is we need different times or different concepts of normal wards. So for example, there's no normal ward for orthopedic surgery. No, you have one, let's say, area reserved for patients who may leave next day or what else, next day over or something like that. Or you have longer patients. They need much more help. So you have more personnel to add them, to help them, etc. Another question is for my I don't like any more rounds on the normal ward. Yes, this is something very special, and from the hygienics and from the technical equipment, etc. So why the patient didn't go to the rounds, yeah, to the visits from the physicians? So this may be something for the polyclinics or something like that. So I think the way you are going and the way Dr. Kühn is going is that we need to rethink the whole thing.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. I mean, what I showed was that research that is only on the department wise, but of course, the whole hospital we have to think about. What we also said for the reactivating hospital, that the patient doesn't, or the doctor doesn't go to the patient, but the patient goes to the doctor. And that's what I also mentioned about the digital possibilities that we have now. We have much more possibilities, digital possibilities, than we used to have. So finding a patient is not so hard anymore. I mean, we can with an iPhone, or I don't know, you can you can find everybody back. And also with, for instance, this was also something with the food, which was really important, that people said we have to know what a patient eats. And in some departments is really important, but also that you can organize this also through with digital solutions. You know, you can organize so much more than this. And what you said about the physiotherapy, we worked a lot together with the physiotherapists, because I think they are really a driving force around this whole idea. And I think the physiotherapy is not only in one room anymore. It's just through the whole area. You should be able to move around and to use it as a physiotherapy environment to do your exercises. I think this is so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And last word, although we as anesthesiologists, for example, need to do much more regional anesthesia, so the patient is able to start up moving on the same day of surgery, something like that.
Yeah.
And so this is a very complex thing. Thank you for your support. Thank you.
So we have two more questions, one by Michael Hiesmeyer, one by Maja.
I think Maja is waiting already. So
yeah, it's quite a different question now, but thank you very much for the presentation. Really interesting concepts of how to motivate people to get out and how to move. And I wanted to ask you, what were some ideas behind it? Like, how do you come up with these concepts? Do you only consult these workshops that you did and the staff, or do you also look at some research that is available? And then from there, another question that I have is, where do you feel that research is missing? What would be useful for practice? And
well, as you see, then there's a lot of research done by, like you did also, and I think we saw a lot that there's a lot of research done how bad it is for you to not move around. I think there's also a lot of research done about how people now move in existing buildings. But I think there's too little research done, and I know it's also really hard, and it's also an expensive kind of research about like facilities or like what we did for the Diakonissenhuis in Zeist. We made there some interactions, and we did monitor them, but we only had a budget to do this like half a year. And it would be so good, it would be so good that we would have much more information about how the built environment would be. And of course, we all know the Ulrich and some of the other, but it would be so good that we somehow have more information about that, because I think this is so important. And this is a hard thing. And we are trying now also to look at for instance, to look at a partner which can research our building in Zierikzee with the 93 front doors for the elderly patient, because I cannot do it all by myself. And why we want that? Because we really want to look at how people are using this space, how much more are they stimulated to go outside, how much more, are they having their own, are they still sort of individual, and how are they moving through the building? And I think this for us as architects is so important to have that, and also to have the evidence to say, hey, it works.
To look back at your project.
It works. Let's go for it. Yeah.
And I just have one.
Yeah,
sorry,
another reactivating hospital that we're getting there. That for new clients, for instance, and also clients choose us a lot at the moment because they say, yeah, we want you because you think about the department differently and you really think about taking care of people differently. But for us as architects, it's really important to have this kind of evidence.
Do you think that any other kind of methods would be useful to investigate this, or only building and then, evaluating? I don't know. It's just a brainstorming question.
Maybe I have to think about that a bit.
Because this is pretty expensive, as you said.
It is expensive. So it would be good to do, and what we do, and I don't know, and I think we try to combine a lot of researches together and then come up to a new solution. So that's what you asked, do you only, but no, we also use a lot of researches that are already done or environments that are already evaluated, and to use it to get a step further. Maybe if you combine things or do small intervention, then then it would be also already helping us a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. My suggestion would be maybe to make the patients more sources of information. Patients could tell you what their experience is. But then it would be very important to standardize this across different settings and groups, and to come up with very simple tools where how you are reporting your activity of daily living in a hospital.
Yeah.
Because patients probably would be happy to be in some way occupied to report.
Absolutely.
On something.
Yeah.
I would, based on our research, I would like to ask you one thing. How can you solve this dilemma? On the one, for example, we found out that people do not eat enough. And it's so if you want to have them eating snacks and you put the snacks far away in the corridor, and if they are not very mobile, the feedback would be that the snack is too far away for me. Would you have a suggestion? How can we find a compromise? Even, let's say, being in one end of the corridor instead of the other end of the corridor, patients would feel favored or not favored. I feel if it's a corridor of, let's say, 45 or 50 meters to get access to drinking, for example, and snacks. Do we already know how this can be solved, or how would you approach?
Yeah, well, in my ideal hospital, there is not a real corridor like in from A to B and to so it's much more spaces that differ in open spaces and sometimes patient rooms and but. Now, I think we always have to think about all the senses also. You talked about light and acoustics. And acoustics could be something negative, but it's also sometimes it's positive for people because they really think it's very comforting to hear somebody outside, that they know that there's somebody there. And that's also with smell. For some patient groups, it's really too much. I mean, if you take an oncology patient, for instance, it's really hard. They can't have the smell. But for like people with dementia, smell's actually very important. Because then they're attracted to go somewhere. When I did a research on dementia and the built environment, we made like also little interventions what we monitored and we were researching how they would react. And one of the ones that worked best was the cookie place, because they're they smelled. We made the fresh cookies and they smelled the cookies and they all came to get a cookie. So I think it is one of the things that are really important for people to get out of bed, to work on all the senses. So yeah, if you have what you say, to get your own coffee, because I think it is really important, of course, for people that are not able to go out of bed to get their coffee in bed, but for people that they get their own coffee or they get their own snack or they get, it shouldn't be too far away. I agree. So you have to really think about the layout of and maybe it's not in one place, but there are in two places on the department. Yes, but you have to really think about all the senses.
When the patient is getting better, the cafeteria should move away from
further. Then it should move away further. So I have to walk further. Yeah, I know that's true.
Yeah, as wir das Krankenhaus in as we build up the hospital in Greifswald, we need to decide which stores comes in. So I suggested that we need to have an ice cream shop. and each patient could get down to the floors one part of ice cream a day free, but you need to go there. So I
No, but it helps. It helps really,
that could help. Okay.
Yeah. We made, which is not, but we made, they also for, like in the Rijnstadt Hospital, for oncology patients, they made these really nice snacks there and you can get them for free. So everybody just wants to go there. So it really helps to think about that. And I think it is very important to not only look at the built environment, but also look at food, movement programs, but also the digital facilities. I think you really have to think about the whole concept. It's not just putting walls and furniture there. It's really about the whole idea behind it. You have to, and that's why you also have to not only talk to the nurses, or you have to talk to the physiotherapist, the hygienic persons, or the hygienics personnel. You have to talk about the food. You have to talk about the logistics. You have to really think together on this whole, because you can't just take one of them out, because if that doesn't work in the concept, then the whole concept just fails.
Yeah.
So Femke, you started with showing us this kind of that, or maybe Maja addressed it, that when the patients enter the healthcare facility, in some way they give up their autonomy.
Yeah.
And maybe this rethinking of the concept would be that still you are autonomous, but to support you, you get tasks, and you have to fulfill certain tasks. Some may be mobility, some may be cognitive tasks, some may be eating a certain amount or go to get your coffee.
Absolutely. And this is also what we do in the Rijnstadt, but also in the Diakonessenhuis. We tell people what kind of department it is. It is not a department where you put on your pajamas. So they already, before they do the check-in, they already get a list, like you need your pajama only for the night, but in the daytime you just put your sneakers on and your, I don't know, your jogging suit or whatever fits nicely, and you are working on your own health and recovery. That's also what they tell. And you get these tasks, and you get also a movement program, and you get also what kind of food you should be eating. So it's really a complete, it's really a complete concept. It's not just one thing,
giving back some
work.
Responsibilities even to the patient, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think this is really important, and that's also what we did in Zurich 7 and that's what everybody was telling. Yeah, but it's people with dementia, and is it possible? And I think it also works there. People are really a lot more independent still. In the way they can still be that. And I think that for everybody, that's also, and it's funny because if you also talk to patients, as I said also with my mother about, getting out of bed, and then she said, but nobody told me this. Why did nobody tell me this? If I would have known, I wouldn't have gone and lie in a bed.
So there is an education part. It's not only doing for patient things, it's also educating them in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
It's more holistic and with all this personnel that we don't have.
Yeah.
And the problem of missing personnel, I think we are still have to consider also the healthcare workers, whether they can work with this additional burden. I think waiting for somebody, for something is a big issue in healthcare institution, and unfortunately digital solutions will not completely help us for that.
No, absolutely not. But if you give more responsibility to the patient, for instance, and if you then also some of the tasks change of the staff. So you also have to, I'm not saying that I'm solving the problem with this, because we have this enormous gap, I know. So this is a future problem. But I do think that if we are aware that we're also more responsible for our own healthcare at home, but also in the hospital, I think it could also maybe think about, we change about how we think about.
This is definitely future research.
Yeah,
Yes.
for instance, we're not finished.
Mere speculation at the moment. It
Yeah.
could be an additional workload, it could be less workload, it could be either way in different situations.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are perfectly in time with our breakout session, and it was a breakout of conventional ideas in this case, most certainly. We just want to remind you with our background slide, which is now coming up, that these breakout sessions are happening in the context of a new master course that we will start, or hopefully will start this fall, on educational facilities at the TU Vienna. And we are just experimenting here with our ideas of interdisciplinary discussions, and hopefully we'll set up the whole curriculum in the same way.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us, all of the speakers. Femke will probably approach you with questions concerning publications that we might add to our homepage. There's a homepage with the recording of
Please
today's
do.
sessions. You can also place papers or other links that you find appropriate.
Please do.
Yes. So thank you very much to everybody, and see you next time on the 25th of January on our breakout session on building information modeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the great
very much.
discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.